pretty much have everyone in terms of our panel. So I'd like to go ahead and give a formal greeting to everyone. Good evening. My name is DuEwa Frazier, and we are here for our spring virtual book launch and research panel for our wonderful book, Teaching Humanities with Cultural Responsiveness at HBCUs and HSIs. So I just want to be able to show this to you all. And I'm so thankful for the contributors and my co-panelists who are here tonight, and I'll be introducing them momentarily. But I first like to give an introduction to this book. And so as I mentioned, I'm the editor of this volume published by IGI Global. And IGI is out of Hershey, Pennsylvania, in case you all are familiar with the publisher. And my inspiration for this book is being a faculty member at an HBCU and having worked with diverse populations of students for several years. Considering that there is not a wealth of current research on faculty and student experiences at HBCUs or HSIs. And if I might speak more specifically, let me be very clear that HBCUs means historically Black colleges and universities, and HSIs mean Hispanic serving institutions. And both of these institutions have been critical in educating generations of Black and Brown students, African-American students, Latinx, Latino A students, and students who typically may be considered as not going to a particular institution, that would be focusing and geared toward the talents and skills that many of these students may bring with them into the classroom in terms of their cultural capital and their linguistic diversity. And some of those aspects have been in the research in discussing why HBCUs and HSIs are still very important for our students today. They feel a need. They have historic contributions throughout time when Black students were not afforded the opportunity to attend PWIs and those kinds of institutions. Historically, HBCUs filled those gaps. And of course, we know HSIs, in terms of being located in regions where there may be predominantly Spanish-speaking students who are from other countries who are considered bilingual, ESL students, and what they need to gain from the educational process in the way of their cultural diversity, the languages they bring into the classroom, and how educators need to differentiate and also use innovations in the classroom, whether it be technology or for diversity of texts, and bringing diverse voices and perspectives into the classroom in order to best educate a cross-section of diverse students. But I also want to mention that the content and strategies in this book are not just for HBCUs and HSIs. As you will note, many of my colleagues who are in this book are not necessarily faculty at HBCUs or HSIs. However, their research and the educational strategies that they care about can meet in any of these institutions and meet very well with the needs and concerns of our 21st century learners. Okay. And so before I close out, I would like to share a bit of the preface of this book because I feel it contains much of the purpose for this publication. And again, I appreciate you being with me tonight. We focus on cultural responsive instruction in this book. And we know that Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, noted scholar and researcher, in 1995 informed us on this particular theory in thinking about how faculty can incorporate home cultures, literacies, and perspectives on community, society, and the world at large into what they teach with a respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As I discuss historically Black colleges and universities, I'd like to cite the great educator from which Bethune-Cookman College is currently named, Mary McLeod Bethune, and a poignant quote from her: "Education is the great American adventure, the world's most colossal democratic experiment. If it is in fact that education serves as an adventure and democratic experience, then it is the role of today's 21st century educators, faculty, teachers in training, program directors, and curriculum developers to practice culturally responsive pedagogies, advocating for that democracy in learning and mirroring the complex needs and cultural backgrounds of our students who hold within them the keys for a technologically current, environmentally sound, globally connected, reflective, and interdisciplinary way of thinking, leading, learning, working, communicating, and creating." Therefore, this edited volume, Teaching Humanities with Cultural Responsiveness at HBCUs and HSIs, seeks to highlight the research of scholars from the disciplines of humanities and education who have valuable insights on culturally responsive pedagogies, teacher preparation, post-secondary curriculums as a whole at HBCUs, HSIs, and all other institutions gearing to serve the needs of diverse college learners, those who may be considered first generation, those who may have first faced societal stereotypes, and who have been deemed at risk for a multitude of challenges which may derail a college learner's goal to attain a college degree and future advanced studies. And so we seek to answer a number of questions in regard to faculty and student experiences and innovations in culturally responsive pedagogies within this volume. Course strategies teachers use during classroom science discourse, children with learning disabilities, culturally responsive teaching, grandparenting, horticulture therapy, food deserts, food insecurity, and gardening. She has written and received several grants and had several invited speaker engagements locally, regionally, nationally, in-state and out of state, and also internationally. Dr. Harris has received the Chancellor's 2023 University Outreach and Engagement Award for her work, and her outreach project on food deserts was recognized and featured on Channel 11 THV, Little Rock's local news. And last but not least, Nikita Jackson has a master's degree in social work from Wright State University and a bachelor's degree in social work from Central State University. Ms. Jackson is a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio with over 12 years of experience in many facets pertaining to social work. Ms. Jackson has worked in many settings, including using her social work skills in areas such as community mental health, child protective services, home health services, crisis intervention, and working with at-risk populations. Her research interests include childhood, youth, and family, mental health, student retention, health, and social care. And please let's give a warm virtual welcome for our panelists. They're co-authors of one chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us today, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to be here. Good evening, everyone. My desire to explore culture responsive teaching emerged while I was working at a predominantly white university, as well as working with individuals from different racial and cultural backgrounds, as well as reading the literature on cultural response teaching. During this time, I developed an appreciation for this area of work, and I saw that there was a need for future research. My colleagues and I we decided we wanted to work on the chapter entitled Understanding Cultural Response Teaching from an Interdisciplinary Perspective because of our different background. So we asked the question, so what is cultural response teaching? It has been well documented and used throughout different classes. I've incorporated it to my own work. I have published on it, and I have connected cultural response teaching with next generation standards. So the work that we're presenting here is a reflection from our chapter. And the research has shown, according to Gay, that cultural response teaching, it's where you use that prior knowledge, cultural knowledge, also incorporating it with the frame of reference and performance style, and making sure that students or individuals from ethnical diverse background are able to understand the information, it's relevant and presented to them in an effective way. If you should pause for a moment, if you've been into a K-12 classroom, you'll see, especially here in Arkansas, it may not reflect a very well diverse environment, because several research have shown that pre-K-12 public schools in the United States, you have more racial as well as technical background students in those schools, especially students of color. But when you look at it from the perspective of the teacher, they tend to be from a middle class. They tend to be white and represent 90% of the workforce that is teaching the students in this setting. So that becomes an issue, because it's very important that the students understand the teacher and the teacher understand the student. So you have a parent-teacher relationship, you have a teacher-student relationship taking place, because so much research has shown that many teachers are inadequately prepared to work with the students in this setting. On another important note, I want to make sure Lightfoot et al. Also emphasize that cultural responsive teaching, it's important and it can be used in a classroom, but how can you use it? In different ways. You can invite your parents, your friends, and different teachers to the school, so you can have cultural events, so you can have them taste food from different cultures. You can have jars where you have students incorporate different names in there, because what is shown, and I experience it from my own perspective, sometimes people do not take the time to pronounce individual's name correctly. And that is where cultural responsive teaching comes in, because research has shown that parents and teachers in the United States, they rename many of the children. Why? They see it from the perspective as an advantage, because they think their student or their child will fit in and that they will not be stigmatized. But when you look at it from the perspective of you're denying the child's identity because you're not pronouncing the child's name correctly. So these are important, and all of these are incorporated into our chapter. And now I'll pass it on to my colleague to further explain our chapter. Thanks for listening.
All right, so hello everyone, and thank you again for inviting us to this great panel to discuss this chapter. So again, in our book, we just highlighted the importance of cultural responsive teaching, and we also provided just different examples and different names of cultural responsive teaching. So some of the different styles that we noted in this chapter, we noted strength-based approach, which is a cultural responsive way of teaching. We also talked about the flipped classroom model. And so as it pertains to the flipped classroom model, it shows that, you can engage the students into the space, invite them in, allow them to be, incorporated inside of your lectures, learning from using a learning model where we learn from one another. So we talked about the flipped classroom as well as transformative learning. Another style that we noted in this chapter was, one second, I made a little note, was infusing Afrocentricity into the space. And by doing so at HBCUs, once again, this allows the students to come into the space and bring in their own learned experiences, their own culture, and then we just kind of learn from one another. So this is a style that we are encouraging professors and instructors to do at HBCUs, because it also encourages and it invites inclusivity and belonging into the space. And once again, this is a way that you can engage students of color so that they can learn on different levels. Okay, so we're inviting them into the learning space so they can learn on different levels. One of the things I want to note is Brock 2023 mentions that also when you do this style of learning and this style of culture responsive teaching, it also increases alumni to get involved. And so that's one of the things that HBCUs are really big on alumni. And so bringing them into the space, allowing them to also help with professional developments, bringing in career opportunities, all of those things. So it's really ushering in a safe space for students to learn, but to grow and also bring in their own learned experiences. So I just wanted to highlight that, just different models. And we really explained all of these different models. We gave examples how you can use these different models in the space, and really want to encourage the space to be inclusive to all cultures.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Karleah. I've had the pleasure to teach both at PWIs and HBCUs with these two wonderful women. I've learned so much, and I'm grateful for that. A lot of what we've found with our social work students is the need to really highlight their strengths, and by doing so, letting them know their amazing opportunity to serve so many folks that they do in the social work field. We share another research study, and we found that there is such a large disparity of service providers in the state of Ohio, where maybe only 5% or less of the actual social workers are serving a population that's well over 13 to 14% Black. And so it is so important that we connect with our students, that we understand not only what they're going through and they understand the material, but they're bringing it back to the communities that they were brought up in, that they were raised in. So we found it important to stress the details and really get the word out so that we can serve the greater community. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to serve with these two amazing folks. That's all I have.
Well, thank you so much, Drs. Trauth, Dr. Harris, and Ms. Jackson. We appreciate it. And of course, we will have Q&A to learn more. And at this time, it's a bit of a quandary here because I'm the host and I've needed someone to introduce me. So I think one of my colleagues said she would step in. And if Dr. Reed is on.
I am here. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. Good evening.
It is my distinct pleasure tonight to introduce our next author and the editor, the visionary for this project, Dr. DuEwa Frazier, MFA. Dr. Frazier is the editor of this new volume, as you've already heard, Teaching Humanities with Cultural Responsiveness at HBCUs and HSIs, which was published this year by IGI Global. She is also an award-winning poet, a children's and young adult author, keynote speaker, assistant professor of English, and digital creator. She holds advanced degrees from Columbia University, the New School, Fordham University, Maryville University, and a BA in English from Hampton University. She has been a Hurston Wright Foundation Writing Fellow and a Voices of Color Fellow at Martha's Vineyard Creative Writing Institute. She received a writer scholarship from Grub Street in 2021. Dr. DuEwa was a featured TED Talk speaker in 2019 for her talk, Word is Bond, an education-themed talk to inspire teachers to use hip-hop arts and scholarship in the classroom. DuEwa has written children's content for Rocket Learning and McGraw-Hill Educational Publishers. Dr. Frazier is the editor of the NAACP Image Award nominated Check the Rhyme, an anthology of female poets and MCs. Her poetry has been published in Arlington Literary Journal, Water Poetry Magazine, Crossing the Divide Anthology, 1111 Literary Journal, Drum Voices Review, Poetry Inc. Anthology, Signify Harlem, Poetry and Performance, published at CUNY, Black Renaissance Noir, Tidal Basin Review, Split This Rock, Essence Magazine, Black Powerful, Black Voices Reimagine Revolution, and more. She is the creator and host of Nerd in Chief of Nerdacity, a podcast featuring author interviews and cultural commentary. Without further ado, the brilliant Dr. DuEwa Frazier.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. And I'm going to time myself. All right, 10 minutes or less. That's my goal. Okay, well, I want to present my chapter with a mic in my hand, introducing hip hop feminism and Black women's digital communications at an HBCU. I consider myself to be a hip hop generation educator and writer. And so a lot of times my teaching and even my writing and creating when I'm working with digital platforms is focused on incorporating hip hop, incorporating performance art, incorporating Black poetics, and very much culturally responsive lens on instructing and trying to hopefully engage my students and meet them where their interests lie. When I was previously a K-12 teacher, and of course, you all know, for any of you who've worked with public schools, we always have the state standards that we're teaching to, right? And you're teaching to and for the state assessments. And I often found that a lot of times, because our students are coming with their own talents and gifts and skills that are not always assessed well through those standardized assessments. In other words, you have the child, you have the young person, but they do not fit perfectly into this rubric or into this state standard. And so through my years as an educator, I developed my own methods and curriculum in order to engage my students and keep them able to access the learning, the text, the reading, without losing much of the standards in teaching, writing, and reading that I really needed to stay geared toward. And so now as a college educator, I still pull from a lot of that differentiation, but I also allow for my students to inform me on what they're interested in, what are they talking about, what's going on in the news and in the culture that most gains their attention and their critical thinking. And so with that in mind, thinking about hip hop pedagogy, I developed a course a couple of years ago. It is an online course where I focus primarily on teaching Black women's arts in hip hop and scholarship and podcasting and digital making, with a lens of feminism, but also in thinking about creative writing and thinking about how do we write critically and respond to the text we're reading, and supporting my students with kind of also a project-based learning where they are creating their own podcast episodes and where they're also creating projects and presentations that are merging video with text and merging graphic arts with their own voices and telling their own stories. So with my chapter, I really first focused on how is teaching with hip hop pedagogy meeting with Dr. Billings' original thinking about culturally responsive pedagogy. And what I found is that I am drawing upon my students' cultural capital, the cultural capital they're already coming in the classroom with, as well as pulling from recent social justice movements. And now with that, what the students are bringing, what we know that's been going on with social justice, now kind of merge that in with some of the texts that I want to teach. And so one of the primary texts that I used was by Dr. Joan Morgan, who you all may be familiar with. She's at NYU. And her memoir that's centered on hip hop feminism, she was really the first person to coin that phrase, hip hop feminism. So you had feminism, and then you have Black feminism, and now it's hip hop feminism. In other words, women of the hip hop generation who are still very much in touch with hip hop culture and who are still very much within the culture in terms of embracing what hip hop has taught us and given to us over the last, well, now hip hop is 51. So just last year when I was developing this chapter in this presentation, everyone was talking about hip hop turning 50. So now we've had hip hop for over 50 years. And how has the shift in hip hop connected to our understanding of not only our community, but relationships? So Dr. Morgan talks about, how can we love hip hop, but also be critical of hip hop in terms of how hip hop treats and views its women, its girls and women, hip hop images that are not always the most positive, right? Lyrics, relationships, and many of the different media that has been created over time that has often given hip hop a negative stigma. So if we can, looking at hip hop feminism, kind of take back some of that and really use it as a lens in which to critique hip hop. And also I'm using it as an instructor to have my students critique. But we're not saying we don't love hip hop culture. We're saying we love it enough to hold it responsible for its messages, images, and philosophies, right, that are very much still impacting our younger generations of students. And so oftentimes within my discussions and the readings, we had Dr. Joan Morgan, excuse me if I didn't mention her text title, When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost, a hip hop feminist breaks it down. She goes chapter by chapter highlighting how the foremothers, right, of civil rights movement, the Black arts movement, what they gave us in order for us as hip hop generation scholars or feminists could be able to still embrace the genius that has come out of those generations and art forms, but still also use our scholarship and writing in order to think critically and discuss what's going on in hip hop. So my course was a special topics course for English. And we really focused on having students not only read Dr. Joan Morgan's text, but having them read various poetry by women poets from my anthology, Check the Rhyme, which was published years ago, 2006, but also from Dr. Gwendolyn Pugh's anthology, and Dr. Pugh is out of Syracuse, and she had an anthology titled Homegirls Make Some Noise, and that had a number of really great critical essays in it that my students could read and write from. And so starting from week one, I started the course to first give them a primer, a foundation, if you will, in hip hop feminism. So hip hop feminism 101 with Dr. Morgan, with some of the poetry from my book, with some of the essays from Dr. Pugh's publication, And then we also went into listening to podcasts. So Angie Martinez, the notable radio host from New York, had a podcast that was posted online that interviewed some of the great female rap artists, MC Lyte, and she even had clips from Cardi B and others that were asking about, what do you think about the misogyny in hip hop? Has hip hop changed? Are women still held to a certain standard and a stereotype when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to relationships and how we interact in the art form with women? And so I really thought that was a critical part to give students to discuss and to write about. We also looked at salt and pepper's place in the culture, because there was a documentary. So I had my students read some articles based on salt and pepper's history. We also looked at the diversity of women in hip hop and how they're not just rappers, but they're also writers. They're also writing for TV. They're directors. They are creating digital content such as the podcasting. And so I had my students listen to the likes of Jean Grey and read articles from The Root that talked about hip hop feminism for the new generation, Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, and some of the newer rappers like that. We also read essays and watched lectures by Feminista Jones, who is a notable pop culture commentator and author. And we really got into a lot of the digital texts in terms of what can be accessed online through podcasting, through TED Talks, that would focus on hip hop feminism and a lot of the criticism on hip hop culture in the last 3 to 5 years or so. And so in closing, I wanted to just mention that in keeping with cultural responsive pedagogy, that students also were able to bring their voice and their perspective into our course deliverables, being able to create a mixtape, if you will. So they created their own mixtape, which is, well, creating a PowerPoint, but you had to give us the playlist of 10 hip hop songs that speak to who you are in your life from birth to the present. And so that was a lot of fun. And I really felt good about that project for them. And so I think I'll just kind of leave it there. And then hopefully we can discuss a little bit more. Thank you so much. Okay. So now let us go to Dr. Reed. Are you ready? Okay, let me introduce you. Dr. Amber T.A. Reed is a Trenton, New Jersey native, serves as a professor at Morehouse College in Atlanta, and a 2023-2025 ACLS Leading Edge Fellow. Dr. Reed was awarded a Bachelor of Arts degree from Spelman College, a Master of Arts degree from Argosy University in Atlanta, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Clark Atlanta University. Prior to her work in academia, she served as a mental health professional serving Black and LGBTQ young adult populations. Dr. Reed is passionate about the study and application of cultural heritage and folkloric practices for the promotion of individual and collective wellness. She is committed to researching, creating, and advocating for wellness services that contribute to the visibility and elevation of Black individuals and communities. Her projects and interests include Black wellness, Black arts, dance, and movement within the African diaspora, Black youth development, African development, and the collection of oral histories in marginalized communities. Please let's give a warm virtual welcome for Dr. Reed.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier, for the introduction, as well as for the opportunity to be a part of this project. I also want to thank my fellow co-authors for your work on this project, but also the very special work that we do every day. I'm sure everybody has their hands in multiple projects at the moment, and many future projects on the way. I want to thank everyone who's in attendance tonight. If you see a name that begins with an A or somebody with the last name Reed, those are my family members who came to support me, as well as my friend Janine Swirsky. A lot of them work in K through 12 education. So when you all were talking about the assessment and teaching to the assess, I saw Janine giving some thumbs up. You had some amens from your amen corner there. So I'm so happy to be here. My chapter, Everything is Content, a Gen Z approach to exploring African American history at in culture at an HBCU, is based on work I did in my early doctoral program, as well as my experiences teaching at Morehouse College. I have the honor of teaching our first year experience African American experience course at Morehouse College, which is an interdisciplinary class designed to introduce first year students and transfer students to the discipline of Africana studies, methodologies, frameworks, and to really get them thinking about how they can apply Africana studies in everything they do. It is one of those required prerequisite courses. So what that means is often I get students who are not in that major field. When they first come, they're not necessarily super excited to be there because it's a required course. And many of them will tell me honestly that they haven't had a lot of education in African American history prior to coming. And so thinking about on an intergenerational level what they connect to, we hear this statement that everything is content all the time. And even if you have social media accounts that you scroll through, we see where it's very common, even without thinking about it, sometimes people see something that catches their attention, they think will be interesting, they pull out their phones, they take a picture, they start recording, and boom, it's on the internet. That has its advantages and it has both its disadvantages. What I've learned in my course is that by using that mindset and by accepting that this is so much a part of these young people's lives, we can get them to consider how they can apply that to their academic studies, as well as how they have transferable skills in their social media use, and it really can be a pedagogical tool. So my chapter starts out by just kind of situating the context, identifying our theoretical framework, which is in meme theory or memetics. That is a theory that was initially developed by Richard Dawkins. It was meant to be the counterpart to genetics. So most of us know, we hear about genes all the time. We've heard a lot about that. Meme theory was meant to be the same concept, but to explain what happens when we get that process with the replication of cultural information and how we pass that down between each other and from generation to generation. Social scientists, as they tried to figure out how they would qualify or operationalize that, felt like it was too broad of a concept to really apply with validity. And so social scientists kind of put it on the table and said, I don't know how much we can do with this. Computer scientists, as the internet came into play in development, later picked this theory back up and saw that the process by which memes replicate and transmit cultural information to people is very similar to the way that information replicates and is shared throughout the internet. And so then computer scientists coined this, as we know now, the internet meme. And there are three properties that Richard Dawkins associated with memetics that computer scientists also associated. So the first is that the information or the content has to have the ability to replicate. It has to have the ability to replicate several times over a long amount of time. And it has to have the ability to do that without losing its original integrity or authenticity. And so if you think about how we have the function to literally hit a repost button on most of our social media apps, or there's the repost app, you can literally take exactly what someone shared without having to do anything to it or doing it in a split second. And boom, we've got millions, thousands of likes. That's what Dawkins was saying cultural information does. And internet scientists said that's what memes do on the internet meme. And so even this term of going viral, all of that came from this original theory of memetics, which was meant to be for cultural information. And so when I started looking at how people define what makes a content creator, what's the process for content creation, we see those three qualities there. And even if we think about the internet as a way of being able to share cultural information, we have all of these different spaces now that pop up. We've got academic Twitter, we've got Black Twitter. And these places allow us to both learn information, preserve culture, contribute to culture, share the culture, and even do forms of activism and other things. So the chapter talks about what that looks like through different situations, such as Trayvon Martin. It talks about how we construct those different spaces. The most recent example that it deals with in there is the Montgomery Brawl, or Fade in the Water, as some people have called it. Most of us are aware of the incident that happened in Montgomery, Alabama, between the dock worker, who was a Black man, and this family of white individuals who were being asked to move their boat because they weren't following policy and procedure. It turned into a big fight. And we had all types of hashtags and memes coming from that. But not only did we kind of have the comedy piece of it, people started going to do research, right? So we started seeing Shirley Chisholm's quote about, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, resurface. We started seeing people circulate, hey, did you know the inventor of the folding chair was a Black man? And so, like, this is what social media has the power to do if used intentionally. So after all this is explained in the chapter, I just go through some specific instances of how I incorporate this in the classroom, down to with many of the concepts that I'm explaining, I'm very much often using various memes. Even if I'm simply sending an email about a test reminder or maybe an accountability email, if there's a meme that fits, it's going to be there in the email. We do explore things like Twitter. We talk about current events as relayed on podcasts. We will pull up actual social media pages. And then my students have two assignments that are a benchmark across this course for the university. One is called a cultural autobiography, and the other is called a service learning project. In my first semester, I had a student who, in his cultural autobiography, shared in full detail and vulnerability the impact of being a high school junior and senior during COVID. And one of the things he shared was that during that time, he set a goal of becoming a viral TikTok content creator. And so he detailed the process of the discipline of the work that he put in every day to make this goal happen, and he accomplished it. And I noticed the same student gave certain contributions in class, but his story indicated a discipline and a work ethic that I wasn't fully seeing in the classroom. And that got me thinking, because he mentioned also somewhere in there, he was in school because his parents wanted him to do it. But he didn't necessarily see the alignment between being in school and content creation. And so it got me thinking about how to incorporate that into the classroom. So our service learning project, students are required to do 10 hours of some sort of learning that helps them to identify an issue that impacts Black communities and apply some effort to remedying it, and then sharing about the experience and the lessons. I have had students who, on an individual basis, bring the spirit of content creation into that project. One student did a social media campaign to raise awareness about Black arts. And so for 30 days, he did research. He picked various artists, their impactful works. He gave the research about it, his analysis of it, what the value of it was, and created a whole Instagram page for that. And so we shared the Instagram page out. People were able to do this process of continuing to repost, reshare it, to follow it. The same student was also a fashion designer. So because of the work that he did on that page, people became interested also in his business and his other artistic pursuits. So he got to see how he could use this to educate others and to learn himself, but also to still reach that goal of gaining the personal following. The following semester, as a class, we did a collective digital exhibit where we visited the Atlanta University archives. Students found 5 items related to our semester units created their own exhibit depicting the African American experience. And then we compiled those on a Google site, which again had this same experience of being accessible to the public, being able to be replicated, and serve these multiple goals. And so I think I'm right about at time, but that's pretty much what my chapter focuses on. And so thank you all again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. All of your presentations are fantastic, and I just love to listen to all of you discuss the research that you're most passionate about, and the contribution that you made to this book is just so powerful and impactful, and I really appreciate it. And so again, we are talking about teaching humanities with cultural responsiveness at HBCUs and HSIs, published by IGI Global. And at this time, I'd love to have a Q&A. And for anyone who would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand, or, if you're not quite familiar with the feature of raising your hand here in the Zoom, then just please, by all means, introduce yourself and ask the question that you want to ask for our panel. How about I'll go first? I'd like to know from the authors who are here with us, how did the research you've done, how has it influenced or impacted your current practice as a faculty, or even as a community supporter, community leader? As I read you all's biographies, it's clear that you all are doing various great works in the community with youth, families, counseling, and various filling a need in society. So I wondered how your research is currently translating to some of the things that you're doing right now. And feel free, any and all of you, to respond.
I can respond first.
Oh, sure.
So I'm trying to practice what I preach, right? What I tell my students. And so one of the things that this work and my research has done for me is encourage me to also kind of have some practice of content creation myself. I'm still learning the ropes around it. I often forget to put my hashtags, which is like a main factor in getting that to be successful. But it's really got me thinking about how I keep an online archive of the research I'm doing, both in the classroom and at my fellowship. With my fellowship, I have the opportunity to examine reproductive justice within Black communities, which can be, I think, a great talking point. And so it gives me the opportunity also to create content around both of those areas.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'll go next. So I'll share that I have started to really, I've always included students into the space, but I've been really intentional in including students into the space and bringing in their own learned experiences. So in our program, in the social work program at Central State University, we have a lot of students from the Bahamas. And so sometimes their government, their system differs a little bit from America. And so I allowed them to, kind of share their experiences, share different things that happens in their government, things like that. And so it's a learning opportunity for everyone. So now they're learning, the other students are learning what happens on a global level. So once again, I have really started to really push more of the different styles of culturally responsive teaching in the classroom, so that it can encourage more people to kind of share and be more open, and also feel more inclusive in the learning environment.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
For me, when I work with the different individuals, I often assure them that cultural response teaching benefits both teachers and students. And there's research that show, because Harman in our 2012 work state that classroom that incorporate cultural response teaching The students, they had higher attendance and they were also more successful and tend to take on leadership position as well as become teacher themselves. And so oftentimes someone said, but how can I become culturally competent, or how can I be a culturally responsive educator? And I said, there are different ways you can go about it. Learn about yourself. You can learn about different cultures. You can interact with different groups. Your department or your school may not have enough money to send you to a different conference that focus on inclusion, equity, and diversity, but there are some that are offered virtually and some that are free, so you can tap into those resources. And sometimes if you find someone that is resistance when it comes on to cultural response teaching, you can lobby with your department and you can talk about it, have seminars and have brown bag lunch and incorporate that into your life so that people understand that it's needed and it has a lot of benefit, because research shown that it's empowering, it's also transforming. So it's important that we incorporate it in our life and live it and not just say it, but actions speak louder than words.
It's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Trauth, did you have something you want to add to that?
Yes, I kind of want to piggyback on Dr. Harris, where we as professors also learn just as much from our students. Like when we keep it kind of open dialogue and kind of break down that power differential in the classroom and know that they still have things to teach us, it really creates a rich dialogue in the classroom. And I think just by seeing that in our research, it has really reinforced those ideas and shown that to be true.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You all are really giving those gems that so many educators need. And I just appreciate your thoughts and your scholarship so much. I also wanted to ask, do any of you all, since this is being recorded and I am going to send this to the publisher, if you would like to give any of your social media at this time on how people can reach you, tweet you, or maybe even find you to trade and share information with scholarship?
Should we drop it in the chat or should we just say it?
You can, sure, speak it and drop it in the chat would be great. Yeah, thank you. And I'll give my, I think someone had dropped out. Okay. And I'll start. I'll just give my Twitter. I'm on Twitter at DuEwa Frazier 1. I think this is the best place for me to exchange ideas with other scholars and network. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Reed. I see you're at culture_keep her and amber.reed@morehouse.edu. Thank you for that. And someone hand raised?
Hi, yes, I actually
Amber, are you okay? I'm sorry. I didn't know that were you having trouble with the sound? Okay. Thank you so much, Catherine at Womanist Writer and C. Saunders at bison.howard.edu. Thank you for that. And Dr. Reed, did you already place your, you did put your social media and your email in the chat?
I am there. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, if you all had any final closing remarks, we can do that for a minute. If anyone has anything else, especially if you have another project coming out, and we'd love for you to plug it if you want to speak on that right now before we officially close out. Dr. Reed, did you have something you want to plug? I know you mentioned you're doing digital archiving. Anything that you want us to be on the lookout for?
Sure. One, I just again wanted to thank everyone for coming and for their work. My next project will probably eventually be a written report, but before that, this is also content creation. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. Myself and two of our students in our CTIMS program, which is funded by Spike Lee and his film efforts, in addition to a Morehouse alum, are in the process of creating a mini documentary on the African American history of Cherokee County, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
There's been a confusion a little bit as to whether that area is a sundown town. It's bordered by Forsyth County and some of the areas that have a very well-known history of historically expelling Black people or not being so welcoming. And so there's a lot of rich history, a lot of information, a lot of Black excellence that hasn't been captured there. But now there are several efforts from Reinhardt University, from us at Morehouse College, in the History Cherokee organization to capture that history, to do what we can to be able to disseminate it, and then also maybe preserve some of the land, some of the historical sites that haven't been so well kept. So just be on the lookout for that, and updates regarding it will be on that social media platform. Culture Keeper is my handle for both Twitter and Instagram. I'm much better at keeping up my Instagram than my Twitter, but by the time this is done, hopefully that will have changed.
Thank you so much for that.